and welcome to a summer top tutorial. My name is Kika and today I'm going to show you how to knit this summer top that I am currently wearing. It is called the OHLALATOP. It's 100% cotton and it's super suitable even if you're a total beginner, because I'm going to show you step by step how you can knit this summer top for yourself. This version I'm wearing, it has the crisscross back, but the one we're gonna make in this video is actually one that has a regular back, but you can choose if you want a regular back or the crisscross back. And I have made a pattern for this top, so you can go and download that. I'll put the link in the description below. It's called the OHLALATOP. But in this video, if you've never maybe followed a knitting pattern before, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm gonna really break it down step by step. It's really simple and easy once you get the hang of it and the logic. Basically, the top is knitted from bottom up on circular needles, and then you bind off stitches for the back, and then you continue a little bit here for the front, make some decreases here on the side, and then lastly you make these straps and then you attach them on the back. So it's super easy. I made this first one sample just in 3 days, so it's also a really quick project, which is very nice for some instant gratification, because usually knitting takes quite a long time. Obviously, before we get into it, I just want to say you can do all kinds of alterations. If you want to have like a ribbed hem, this one doesn't have. This one is just like kind of has a little bit like a curl to it, and all these things. And you can even make the straps thicker if you want. So that's all up to you, but I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let's get into it. For this project, you'll need a set of circular needles. I am using 4.5 millimeters, so that's a US 7. But again, remember, you might have to change the needle size to get gauge. So you want to make sure that in a 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inch square, you have 17 stitches. Now, the rounds don't make that much difference, because you can always adjust that. So the pattern says to knit a specific height. So even if your round gauge doesn't match completely, that's okay. It's more important that the stitch gauge matches. I am using 4.5 millimeters, so that's a US 7. So this is just a recommendation. Do a swatch first and then check what needle size you'll use. You'll also need 2 double-pointed needles, so DPNs, that are a little bit smaller than your circular needle. So I'm using 4 millimeter, that's a US 6. Double-pointed needles, and we're going to use these for the shoulder straps. You could also use circular needles if you don't have double-pointed needles. That works fine as well. You'll also need a measuring tape. This one is super pretty. It's from Coco Knits and was gifted to me, and I love that it's pink. And then you'll also need a pair of scissors, and also you'll need stitch markers. These are also from Coco Knits. So just a stitch marker to keep track of where the round begins and where it ends. And of course, lastly, you'll also need a tapestry needle to attach the shoulder straps in the end. This top is knitted in 100% cotton yarn. I am using Sandnes Garn Mandarin Petite. So this is 100% cotton yarn. And I think I am going to choose this lovely kind of light lavender color. And let's see here. The yardage for this cotton yarn is 180 meters per 50 grams. So if you're gonna use another yarn, I recommend to try to find a yarn that has a similar amount of meters or yards per 50 gram. And this top is worked with 2 yarns held double, so we're gonna need 2 strands when we actually start the top. One thing I want to say before we start is that this hem, we don't do any rib in, so it's gonna roll up a little bit. Now I've blocked this top, so it's not rolling up as much as it did when I just knitted it. So just pay attention to that and be mindful that when you're knitting and you feel like, oh, it's rolling up a lot, you can fix that when you block it, and then it's not gonna roll up as much. All right, grab your needle and your yarn, and we are ready to begin. So this top is worked with double yarn. So you'll take 2 balls of yarn and just holding them double. So first we're just gonna wrap using the wrap on cast on method to cast on as many stitches as the pattern says. So I am going to be making size small. So for that one, I need 128 stitches. So first I just made a simple slip knot. And there I have this tail of yarn that I'm just gonna leave. And then I'm just going to grab the yarn like this, put my thumb underneath, take my right hand needle, and I made one stitch. So I have 2 stitches now. And I'm just gonna continue this until I have 128 stitches. And for your size, it says in the pattern how many stitches you need. For this design, the hem is really visible, so I actually try to make my stitches quite tight. So I don't tighten it like insanely. I try to keep it even tension, but I also don't make sure to not leave them loose like this, but try to keep it pretty even. And kind of, the more you relax, I find that helps. 127 and 128. All right, I have my stitches. Now, your cable and your stitches probably look something like this. So they're all twisted. So now it's very important before we join in the round to make sure that they aren't twisted. So what I like to do is first start from where I just left off, and then just make sure I distribute my stitches evenly and just make sure that they aren't twisting and turning, because that will not look great and will get us into trouble once we start knitting. So I go through all of them, try to space them out evenly. All right, like this, and then carefully I join them in the round. I turn it around. Ooh. Okay, and then take the yarn back there. And now to keep track of where the beginning of the round is, it's a good idea to put a stitch marker here. So let's do that. You can just grab any kind of stitch marker or a ring or just something that you can thread onto the needle, and then you'll know that that is where your round changes. All right, so then we just begin to knit, and the first round is always a little bit tight. You might have to really try to get your needle in there. It helps if you keep the stitches, like you bunch them up always here a little bit, and you keep the stitches quite close to the tip. So instead of being like down here, you keep them pretty close to the tip, and then you go in there. And as again, the first round is always takes the longest. It's a little bit cumbersome because the stitches are quite tight, but then after this you'll get into the flow and it's going to be much more easier. And what I like to do is always just distribute my stitches every once in a while and kind of bunch them up so they're all ready to go here, so I don't have to stretch out my stitches so much as I'm knitting. Work measures around 31 centimeters. It's time to bind off for the back. I'm a knitting size small, so I'm going to be binding off 64 stitches. So I've placed a stitch marker here, that's the beginning of the round marker, and then I'm just going to count to half the stitches so I know how many stitches to bind off. So let's see here, that's the beginner, so I'm starting here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 62, 64. So until here. So I'm just placing this marker here, so I know that until here is where I have to bind off my stitches. So it's basically just half the total amount of stitches you have on the needle. So I'm just gonna knit the last stitch of that round. Then I can go ahead and remove this marker. And then I'm just gonna start binding off. For the bind off, you first knit 2 stitches as you would regularly, And then you just drag this first stitch, pass it over like this, and then you bound off one stitch. So we continue to do this until our marker. And I'm binding the stitches off pretty tightly. I don't want it to be loose, because this is going to be the back. So if it's going to be very loose, it's probably going to curl up. So I try to bind off really nice and even, but also pretty tight. So here is my marker. So I bound off almost all the stitches. One more, and now you still have one stitch left on the right needle. So we're just gonna remove this marker, and then we're gonna, because we're going to bind off this stitch as well. So then we were just gonna knit one and bind off that last stitch, so that now I've bound off half of the stitches. So we will have one stitch here already on your right needle. And now we've bound off the back. We are ready to start working the front. So we're gonna start working the front back and forth. So we're gonna knit and then we're gonna purl back. And on every knit round, we're gonna do some decreases here at the start and also at the other side. So because this first row, you already have one stitch on your right needle, you are just gonna have that there, and then we're gonna do an SSK decrease. So that's a decrease that is gonna lean to the left. So to do so, insert your right needle into the first stitch as you would knit it, but you're not gonna knit it, you're just gonna slip it. And let's do that one more time. So again, you just slip it and you go in through the front here. So as if you would knit it, but you don't knit it, you just slip it. So now you've slipped these two stitches onto the right needle, and now we're gonna knit them two together, but we're gonna do it like this, that you take your left needle in through both of the stitches, then you wrap around yarn, and then you knit them two together so that they lean to the left. And this is a SSK, stands for slip, slip, knit. Slip, slip, knit, because you slip two stitches and then you knitted them together. And then you're just gonna continue knitting all the way across until you have 3 stitches remaining. So no matter what size you're knitting, you're gonna knit all the way until you have 3 stitches remaining. Now, because we are working flat, so we're working back and forth, these are called rows instead of rounds. So when you work rounds, when you do it in a tube or circularly, you have rounds, and now when you knit back and forth, there is rows. And one is the right side, which is the one that we're currently working on, and then you have a wrong side, which is the purl row that we're gonna work. When you have 3 stitches left on your left needle, we're gonna knit these 2 stitches together. So to do that, simply just knit as you would normally do, but instead go through 2 stitches at a time. So you knit these 2 together, and this is now a decrease that is gonna lean to the right. And then just knit that last stitch, but be careful to not stretch it out too much, as this is going to be our edge. And now you've decreased 1 stitch on both ends. And next, you're just gonna turn the work around, and then we're just gonna purl this next row. And be extra mindful here at the beginning to not stretch this first stitch out too much. Usually it helps if you keep the stitch pretty close to the tip of the needle. Most people purl looser than they knit, so it's a good idea to try to keep extra, or be extra mindful that you keep an even tension, and maybe you have to tighten this yarn a little bit more than you would do when you knit, just to prevent it from looking much looser. I know, at least for me, I purl quite much looser than I knit, so I always try to be just a little bit extra mindful. Here you can, by the way, see that I've just joined in new yarn by just doing a little knot. With cotton yarn, you can't really do spit splicing. And I know some people prefer to then just weave in the ends at the end, but I actually just prefer to do like these tiny little knots, because if you weave in the yarn, it usually becomes a little bit thicker. So that's just the way I do it. I've never had a problem with it showing on the right side. When you've purled all the way across, just again turn the work around, and then you're just going to repeat these 2 steps an X amount of time, depending on what size you're knitting. So now again, we're just going to work on the right side. So this is now row 3. So first, we're now gonna knit this first stitch. So we get that 1 knit stitch on our right needle. And then again, you're gonna do an SSK. So you're gonna slip again from the front. So as if you would knit it. So this is called knitwise. If you would do it purlwise, you would go in through here, but we're gonna do it knitwise. So we've slipped 2 stitches, then you insert the left needle into the stitches, wrap around yarn, and you knitted them together. So now they're leaning to the left. And then continue to knit all the way across. All right, so we are nearing the end. So again, when you have 3 stitches, no matter what size you're knitting, you're gonna knit these 2 stitches together as you would normally, but you instead take your needle through 2 stitches at the same time, wrap yarn around, go back in, and then you transfer that stitch onto the right needle. So you've decreased 1 stitch by knitting these 2 stitches together. Knit the last stitch, and that was row 3. And now again, we're just gonna turn the work around and just gonna purl back. So now we just continue to repeating these 2 rows. So 1 row of working decreases and then 1 purl row. And for the size I'm knitting, so that is the size small, I'm going to repeat these rows 3 and 4 5 more times after I've worked these 4 rows. So altogether that is going to be 7 times, so 14 rows. When you work the decreases on the edges here, so I'm working the size small, so I've decreased 14 stitches on, so 7 stitches here, 7 stitches there, but this will depend on what size you're working. And next we're gonna work the shoulder straps. And to do so, we're first gonna do the right shoulder, and these stitches are just gonna be on hold. When we work the whole right strap, then we're gonna bind off stitches in the middle, and then lastly, we're working the left side shoulder strap. So to do so, you're going to need 4mm double pointed needles, and 4mm, so that's a US 6, or you could also use a circular needle, but I just find it's a little bit handier to have these shorter double pointed needles. So to begin, we just need 1, but you're gonna need 2, and we're gonna work these back and forth. So just gonna start, grab the yarn, and make sure you're on the right side. The shoulder straps are gonna be 7 stitches, and we're gonna do a knit and a purl. So we're gonna knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, until we have 7 stitches. So let's do that. So first do a knit, then we do a purl, do a knit, a purl, knit, and finish with, no, sorry, not finish with the knit, purl, finish with the knit stitch. So you have now 7 stitches for the shoulder strap, and then these stitches we're just gonna leave on hold, so we're not gonna work those. I'm gonna turn the work around, and I'm gonna grab my other double pointed needle, and then on the other side we're gonna purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, and purl. And again, remember this first stitch, the one that is gonna be the edge, try to make sure that you don't stretch it out, but try to knit it pretty tight and just make sure that it's pretty neat, because these are gonna be the straps, so that's gonna be very visible if it's very loose. And then just turn the work around again. So this is how you're going to continue making your shoulder straps until they are the desired length. Depends a little bit on if you're going to do just a regular back or a crisscross back. For the crisscross back, you want your shoulder straps to be a little bit longer. And at this point, I really recommend that you try it on to get exactly the length of shoulder straps you need. We're all different, so we have different proportions. So the shoulder strap length can be very, very individual. So just knit until like a good size or a length, and then try it on and pin it in place to see that you get a length that is good. And remember the straps, because we're knitting, they do stretch quite a lot in when you wear it. So maybe go for a little bit shorter instead of longer if you're kind of not sure. The reason we're working the shoulder straps in this 1x1 rib is that otherwise they would curl easier. So when we're making a 1x1 rib, they become a little bit more a little bit chunkier, and we just make sure that they don't curl up. So it becomes a little bit neater. I've knitted the first strap until 29 centimeters, so now I'm trying it on to see if it is a good length or if I need to continue. Just making sure that I don't lose any stitches. And let's see. Okay, I might need a few more. I think I'm gonna do like a couple more centimeters, maybe like 2 more centimeters. But otherwise, I think it's pretty good. And then I'm gonna do the other strap. All right, when you're happy with your strap length, so I just tried mine on and I've settled for 33 centimeters. So I'm just doing the regular back. So 33 centimeters, that appears to be 13 inches if I'm reading this measurement correct. And then I'm just gonna bind off these stitches. And it's a good idea to maybe have like 1 centimeter more than you would need, because we're gonna sew this or attach this on the back. So now we're just going to bind off in pattern, or you could just bind off just by doing knit stitches all the way. And after this, we're gonna bind off stitches for the middle, and then we're gonna work the other strap exactly the same way. When you bind off all the stitches, go ahead and cut that yarn. And actually, should have left a longer tail so we could attach the shoulder strap. I was too quick there, but I think this is gonna be maybe enough to then attach the shoulder strap onto the back. All right, so that is your right shoulder strap done. So now we're gonna go back to these stitches that we have on our circular needle. And now you're gonna need to join in some new yarn. So just grab the yarn and we're gonna bind off stitches until we have 7 stitches left. So that's gonna be our second shoulder strap. So I just begin, knit 2, and then I drag this first stitch over the second one. Oh, it becomes pretty loose because you have this new yarn here, so you can just tighten that a little bit. And then I just continue until I have 7 stitches remaining, including the one that I will have then on my right needle. And here again, I do take care to bind off pretty tightly. I don't want it to be too loose because that will then result in it kind of flaring out. And because this is going to be in the front, you want to make sure that it's pretty neat and quite tight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to bind off 1 more so that I have 7 stitches in total. This last one I'm gonna transfer onto this one. And then I'm gonna grab my 4mm needle instead, double pointed needle. And then, so this first one has been worked already, so I'm just gonna transfer that onto this one. And then you're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna purl, or the first one we knitted, then purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and knit. So there you have 7 stitches. Then this one you can go ahead and just put aside, grab the other double pointed needle and turn around, and then you're just gonna do the same steps we did for the first strap. So now we're just gonna purl and knit each of these. So the ones that we just knitted on the right side, we're gonna purl. The ones we purled on the right side, we're gonna knit. And then just repeat this until your strap is as long as you worked the first strap. And then the last step is to attach them. All right, before we start attaching the shoulder straps, you might want to close that gap that might have formed from where we joined in new yarn when we bound up the stitches in the middle. So grab your tapestry needle and do what you need to do to make this as invisible and neat as possible. I tried to trace that bind off edge on the front, and I just don't want there to be this gap from where I joined in this new yarn. So you might want to do that first. Then we are going to attach the straps on the back, and I am doing the regular back for this version. So I am going to attach my straps about the width of the strap more towards the middle so that the distance between the straps is more narrow on the back than on the front. Similarly, if you're going to do the crisscross back, you want to have the straps with a more narrow distance between them than in the front. But remember, the best way to make sure that you get a placement that you're happy with is to try on the top at this point and pin them in place while you're actually wearing it. Grab your tapestry needle, and to attach them, I recommend to go in through that front loop of the bind off edge. So only going in through the front loop and then going in through the actual strap. Now, mine was a little loose and wonky. I bound it off a little bit sloppy, something happened, so I just tried to correct that and make any needed adjustments to make it as neat and nice looking as possible. The last step is to block your knit. So blocking essentially just means that you're gonna soak it and then you're gonna dry it flat. Because this top was knitted with 100% cotton yarn, I'm pretty safe to use pretty warm water. So I'm just gonna fill up the sink with warm water and then soak the entire top in it. And you might have to squeeze out any air bubbles just to make sure that every fiber gets properly soaked. Let it be there for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe take a little bit of a nap or a break while you wait, and then squeeze out all the water. Make sure that you don't wring or stretch it out while the knit is still wet. Roll it up in a towel, burrito style, stomp on it to get all the excess water out, and then lay to dry flat. So here you can really stretch it out to size and also flatten out that rolled up hem. La. Enjoy the end result. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I would love to see your knits. If you decide to go ahead and follow this pattern, you can use the hashtag OHLALATOP, and I have left the link to download the pattern on Ravelry in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you'll have fun trying out some summer knits. I had so much fun making this top, and I am for sure gonna make more of these kind of summer cotton tops. They're so quick to knit and so simple to knit. All right, thank you so much for hanging out, and come and say hi. I am over at Kika on Instagram. See you next time. Bye!